Someone told me about a friend of his who got his first job in a city office. He was introduced to his supervisor, who seemed polite enough. The supervisor assigned him to a certain task for that day, and he finished the job in an hour. Of course, that would seem that perhaps he rushed it a bit, so he reviewed his work again and again, and when he was absolutely certain that he had done it in a correct fashion, and he was satisfied with the results, he went back to his supervisor and said, well, here's the assignment you gave me for the entire day. And the supervisor said, impossible. How could you have finished it only in an hour? And he said, well, please review my work. And when the supervisor did, he said, why, it's perfect, you really finished it. And he thought that that would manifest itself in a wonderful compliment. But from the looks on the eyes of his supervisor, he understood right away that a compliment would be far from coming that day. On the contrary, he seemed to almost blow up in a rage. You dare do this again, and you can find yourself a different department to work in, the supervisor told him. And so when this stunned, proud, first day on the job rookie walked back to his desk, shaking his head, trying to figure out why, what, and when, it suddenly occurred to him what the problem was. If this ever got out to the higher-ups, that a 12-hour job can be done in 1 hour, that means that most of the department was really doing a 1-hour job in 12 hours. As a result, the whole department could be branded as the epitome of waste and unnecessary overtime. He was threading in dangerous waters by being a little bit too efficient. And so the next day he got the message. He brought along his, well, not a Gemara because he was scared that would attract too much attention, but copies of his Daf Yomi and yesterday's Daf and tomorrow's Daf. He did his job in 1 hour, spent the rest of the day learning, and when he came to his supervisor at 6 o'clock and turned in his work, his supervisor smiled and said, why, that's much better. In this Olam HaSheker, over-efficiency can be just as detrimental as being sub-sufficient. However, in the Olam HaEmes, it doesn't work that day. For example, the Orach HaKodesh says, B'Shem Derizah, that every person's neshama is broken up into netzitzis, into holy sparks. And there is a cheshbon, there is a counting for all of these sparks. They are divided throughout the person's lifetime. Every single day of a person's life, he has to be misakin some of these netzitzis. That doesn't mean that we consciously go out and look for sparks. It means we consciously go out and try to be the best yid that we can, and automatically we are misakin these netzitzis. So if a person is given a certain amount of years on this life, for each of those 120 years, for every single day during those 125 years, there are parts of his neshama that require a tikkun. And even though in the course of our life we may feel that sometimes life is monotonous or boring or redundant, when we will come up to Shemayim and look back at our life in general, then we will see that there was not an extra minute in our life. Every single day of our life had its mission, had its job. We either did or did not accomplish what we were supposed to during the course of those days. Famous marshal from Chafetz Chaim, Avram Zaken Baba Yanim. Avram came with all of his days. Two people come up to Shemayim, an old man with a long white beard who left this world at the ripe old age of 98, and another young man, Rahman Otzlan, who left early. And the young man with the black beard was taken in front of the old man with the white beard, who began to bang with his cane and scream and say, this is the Olam HaEmes? How come he goes before me? I'm older. Where's Derech Eretz over here? If there's no Derech Eretz up here, then where should there be Derech Eretz? So the Malachim calmed him down, as the Chafetz Chaim illustrates in this mashal, and they explained to him that over here, whoever's older goes first, and the one before you is older. So again, he started to scream and yell, he's older, look at my long white beard. What do you mean he's older? I was 98. This man doesn't look like a day over, and they stopped him. They said, you have to understand something. That you're counting how many years you lived on this world. That's how you're determining your age. It doesn't work that way up here. Up here in Shemayim, a day that a person accomplished what he was supposed to that day, for every single day of your life there is something you have to go out and accomplish, different nisyonos, different tests, different emotions or things that you have to master. If you did what you had to do for that given day, then that day counts as a day. If you didn't, you may have lived through the day, you breathed through the day, but it doesn't count as a day. Now, true, you lived in this world for 98 years, but we count up only a sum total of 30 years. This person may have lived far less than 98 years, But when you add up the days that count, he is older than you. He is in his 40s. And therefore, he goes first. The Arvi Nachal explains, however, also from the Arizal, that just because a person has a certain amount to accomplish in a given day, that doesn't mean that he is limited to what he has to accomplish on that day. Just like it is possible to be under-efficient, you can be over-efficient. As a matter of fact, a tzaddik with his vigorous avodah can accomplish a whole year in one day. And what happens with all that extra avodah? Well, besides the fact that obviously he's going to get paid double overtime, but the tzaddik whose avodah, whose concentration is always based on helping others, who creates a scenario where many others who have not accomplished what they had to gain by being under the umbrella of the tzaddik, through the tzaddik's over-intensified avodah. For example, our parsha begins, Viyechi Yaakov b'Eretz Mitzrayim, Sheva Esrei Shana. Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. And then the pasuk gives us the sum total of Yaakov's life. Vayechi Yaakov Shnei Chayav, Sheva Shonim V'Arbaim U'Ma'af Shana. And the days of Yaakov, the years of his life, were 147 years. In last week's parsha, Paro asked Yaakov, how old are you? And Yaakov answered 130. So it doesn't take a math major to figure out that if he lived for an additional 17 years in Mitzrayim afterwards, the sum total of Yaakov's years were 147. Why does the pasuk have to give us the sum total? The Arvi Nachal explains that there's a whole different message in this pasuk. The intention of Vayechi Yaakov Shnei Chayav Sheva Shana V'Arbaim U'Ma'af Shana is not to tell us that Yaakov lived for a total of 148 years. It is to tell us that during the course of Yaakov's 17 years in Mitzrayim, he accomplished what normally would take a total of 147. That's because Yaakov's avodah was so intense it went far and beyond what was allotted to it for those specific days. Now, who are the beneficiaries of Yaakov's overtime, of his extra avodah? The answer is Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael was supposed to be in Mitzrayim for 400 years. That's what the Kadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu. Ultimately, however, the duration of their stay was limited to 210 years. So where are the missing 190 years? There are many terutzim, and this one to the list. The Arvi Nachal explains Yaakov Avinu's avodah was so intense. Yaakov Avinu's avodah was so vibrant that he was able to accomplish 147 years of assignment every single day of his life. For each day of Yaakov's life, he would fulfill what he really had to accomplish throughout his lifetime. So when our pasuk is telling us about Yaakov Avinu's numbers, the pasuk is saying, yes, he chronologically lived in Mitzrayim for 17 years. In terms of what that means, in terms of how they count years in Shemayim, well, you should know, Yaakov's life was 147 years. Not that he lived a sum total of 147 calendar years. That we can figure out on our own. But the pasuk is telling us Yaakov Avinu, on each day of his life, lived for 147 years. Yaakov, these were the days of Yaakov. Every single day was 147 years. Now, does that mean I should take 147, multiply it by 365, and for each year of Yaakov's life, apply all those years to the benefit of Klal Yisrael? So the Arvi Nachal explains that it doesn't work that way. And he goes into a complex cheshbon al pi Kabbalah, why it doesn't work that way. And after using various different Kabbalistic formulas, he explains that in terms of credit, what can be applied to future generations, every year of Yaakov Avinu's life would count for 8 years for Klal Yisrael. How this is so and how he gets this number, you can look into the Arvi Nachal in Pashas Vayigash. We won't go into his various different Kabbalah cheshbonis for a whole host of reasons. First and foremost, I can't truly tell you that I understand it. But I think the lesson, aside for how he gets his numbers, is powerful enough that it's good for us to delve into. The Arvi Nachal says that in Kabbalah cheshbonos, this is the formula, that when a person does extra, in terms of how it benefits his children, you multiply it by 8. For every year of his life, you get another 8 years. Therefore, For Yaakov Avinu, 17 years in Mitzrayim, for enduring 17 years of this Golus, Klal Yisrael will be credited 17 times 8, a sum total of 136 years against the 400. That still doesn't answer our question. Because even if you take off 136 out of the 400, you're still left with 264. And Klal Yisrael was in Mitzrayim for only 210 years. So how do we account for the missing 54 years? So that's the Arvinachal. The Rechaim Kadosh in our Sedra wondered why sometimes Yaakov is referred to as Yaakov and sometimes he's referred to as Yisrael. And he's in the Vayir over there. Like in every person's life, we have loftier times, higher madregas in our spiritual development, and lower madregas. Times that we're happy and the Kedusha fills our every breath, times that are difficult for us, and our Nisayin is Amunah, we're on a lower madrega. That is true for everyone. We can well imagine Yaakov's lower madrega was far and beyond anything we could imagine at the epitome of our spiritual heights. But nonetheless, relatively speaking, Yaakov had lower times and higher times in terms of his spiritual progress. Therefore, Yerushalayim HaKadosh says, during trying and difficult times, when that was the Nisayin, the Pasuk refers to him as Yaakov. During higher times, the Pasuk refers to him as Yisrael. Now, the lower time is not a criticism of Yaakov Avinu. On the contrary, that's the growth process of every human being. We endure difficult times, and by enduring it properly, we are zocha to higher madregas. Yaakov Avinu's avodah as Yaakov was that during the 17 years of Yaakov avodah in Mitzrayim, of lower avodah, he accomplished for each of those years 8 times the amount to be credited to Klal Yisrael. That gave Klal Yisrael the deduction of 136 from the 400 of Gzeres Mitzrayim. However, toward the end of Yaakov's life, when the Pasuk says, "Vayischazik Yisrael," when Yosef Tzaddik came to him, so over here he was in a much higher madrega. Sort of like what every Yid is zocha to when he gets his neshama Yisrael on Shabbos, the Yerushalayim HaKadosh explains. He's a different person. The Zohar HaKadosh says, quotes the Arvinachal, "Vayishtachu Yisrael Rosh Hamita," that he bowed down toward the Shechina, which he perceived by the Rosh Hamita. Mita is the gematria, Nun Dalet, 54. So when Yosef Tzaddik came to him, Yaakov perceived that he would now be at his very highest madrega. He would be zecher to the most simcha, henceforth the most ruach HaKodesh, which is linked to the amount of simcha in a person's heart. And right away, he would use his utmost energy to take advantage of this for the benefit of Klal Yisrael. Vayischazik Yisrael. He strengthened himself and bowed down Rosh Mita to be mamshach such a degree of Ashuras HaShechina, Mita, Gematria 54, to add on an additional 54 years to be credited off the 400 that Klal Yisrael was supposed to endure in Golus. So his avodah during his China of Yaakov took off 136 years. Toward the end of his life, with this one special good day, where he was also to so much higher of a madrega, with that day itself, he took off another 54 years. Sum total of credit, 190. Deduct 190 from 400, you have 210, which was the amount of years Klal Yisrael had to endure in Mitzrayim on their own. Now, if you take into account that Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim just in the nick of time, they were almost in the Nun Shari Tumah. Had they been there 1 second longer, the Rizal tells us, Geula would have not been Shayach. So Yaakov Avinu's extra avodah for his children not only shortened their time, it guaranteed their existence. Now this concept, that whatever a person has, pertains to him, the exact amount of days, the exact amount of money, the people, the relationships in his life, is also explained by the Baal Shem Tov in this week's Pasha. On the Pasuk, Yisavcha Chamar Garem, Roivetz Bein Hamish B'Sayim. The Baal Shem Tov says that in the effort of learning Torah with Mesiras Nefesh, represented by Yisavcha, our avodah through Mesiras Nefesh, represented by Yisavcha. So we are compared to the donkey carrying its burden. Chamar, besides for donkey, also represents the word Chumriyos, meaning the lowest parts of Olam Haza, Roivetz Bein Hamish B'Sayim, that lays amongst the lowest places of this world. Don't think, says the Baal Shem Tov, If you're in a situation where it's so void of ruchnius that your particular day can't have any shaykhs to your avodah, it's exactly the opposite. Chamar gara, the chamar, the chumrius, the more difficult your nisayon, the more gashmius you sink into, the greater the taivus you have to battle. This is the opportunity, the droivis ben mishpasayin. You can lift up the most beautiful sparks, the greatest levels of kedusha that have been buried into the taivus of this world. In other words, to make things simple and understandable. The more difficult your situation, the more you're overwhelmed by frustrations and taivus, then sustaining it and enduring it creates a situation where you are misakein an unbelievable amount in as much as your assignment is concerned. That benefits the world, that benefits your children, and that ultimately we will see how this benefited ourselves in a way that we could have never accomplished had we not faced the chumriyas, the difficult questions and frustrations of this world. The Baal Shem Tov stresses that everything in this world exists only because there is chiyus of a Kadosh Baruch Hu there, because the Rebbeinu Shalom makes it exist. And everything that has a guf of a hava has a neshama of ruchnius in it as well. Whatever you eat, the Baal Shem Tov says, the house that you live in, your particular business or lack of such, your business dealings, the people in your generation, the relationships around you, your neighbors, your mate in life, everything has to do with who your neshama is. Every day that you deal with them is a particular aspect of your assignment. When a person is Vayechi, he is misaken what he has to be misaken. And in turn, all these things, his items, the people in his life, serve to help him and assist him. If he doesn't meet the challenges, his particular challenge properly, then what happens is in the course of time, his things, his items, or the people that he works with turn against him, the Baal Shem Tov explains. It's interesting to note that the Baal Shem Tov says that's why if you lose something, or something breaks, don't be upset about it, because on the contrary, the fact that it disappeared out of your hands could be an indication that in Hashemayim you have already accomplished all that needed to be accomplished vis-a-vis your relationship with that item, person, or so on. Sometimes you may lose interest in an item and you sell it or you give it away and someone else wants it. That could be a good sign. That means perhaps that you are misaken all the inyanim that relate to you, where it has a shaykhus to your neshama, and now someone else has to pick it up. You have to be misaken the aspect of it that relates to his neshama. One thing is for sure, in as much as to what we really understand about this, but we should have the chizuk of appreciating what we have, and understanding that time is indeed a terrible thing to waste, because one can never imagine how much one good day down here counts above. The Medrash tells us as soon as the Ruach HaKodesh returned to Yaakov, Yosef placed Menashe, his older son, on Yaakov's right, and Ephraim, the younger one, on his father's left to receive the bracha. And of course, as we all know, Yaakov reversed his hands, placing the right on the head of Ephraim, the younger one. His left he put on the head of the older son, Menashe. The reason for this switch was that he foresaw that the younger one would become greater than the older. The future leader, Yeshua, would be his descendant. Then Yaakov gave the bracha, Elikim Haraya Oisi, Hamal Chagoyo, and he concluded, Yesimcha Elikim Ke Ephraim Uke Menashe. In other words, that this will become the symbol of bracha, as indeed it is. Those that bench their children every Friday night, those that have the minig to bench their children Yom Kippur, we say Yesimcha Elikim Ke Ephraim Uke Menashe. There are many brachas in the Torah. There are many brachas in this parsha that Yaakov Avinu offered to all of the Shuatim. There are the brachas of Moshe Rabbeinu in V'zaysa bracha. There's the bracha of Yitzchak to Yaakov. There are the brachas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to the others. Why? Are these words, Yisimcha Elikim Ke Ephraim Uke Menashe, out of all the brachas in the Torah, the epitome of bracha, the symbol that we all try to emulate, the very essence of our hope? Why are these words more so than any of the other brachas in the Torah? The Agad Dekalos is the most fascinating shot, a tremendous insight over here. That if you don't have the right eyes, sort of gets lost in the sequence of the psukim. We all know about the great to-do between Yaakov and Esav, the brachos that were switched, the sin of hatred, and basically that's the story of life, the jealousy that one sibling may feel when another appears to be getting it better, appears to have found more favor, a fellow worker, a fellow cousin, so-and-so is going to get more than I. That's the story of the destruction of the world. Something very special happened over here. Whatever the case may be, there was somewhat of an uncomfortable situation that took place. Ephraim, the younger one, got the bracha before Menashe, who was the par. Two things should have happened. One is that Ephraim should have looked down at his older brother. You see, I got the bracha before you. I am the dominating force over here, despite the fact that chronologically you may be a step ahead of me. Menashe, for his part, should have been jealous of Ephraim. Neither happened. Despite the embarrassing situation, despite Yosef trying to correct it, despite what happened over here, that the younger one got the bracha before the older one, and they knew very well what a bracha from Yaakov Avinu means. It wasn't just hearsay. It was a blessing that would manifest itself into the most real of realities forever after, despite the fact that the younger one got the bracha before the older one. Two things didn't happen. Ephraim didn't look down at his older brother, and his older brother was not jealous of the younger brother. Menashe, for his part, never mentioned, never showed, never felt any resentment. If Ephraim represented Yeshua, and that would be the continuity of Klal Yisrael, then Ephraim deserves the greater bracha. There was a non-issue between these two brothers. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu proceeds with his bracha, Hamalach Hagoyel Oisi Mikaro Yivorech Es Hanorim, and then he looks at Ephraim and Menashe and sees they didn't change. Despite the fact he had to engage in this somewhat uncomfortable pattern of bracha, pushing in the younger one before the older one, the two were the same Ephraim and Menashe, the same friends as beforehand. And therefore, Yaakov Avinu said in retrospect, not dismissing the bracha that I gave you until now, I want to conclude with what is really going to be the greatest source of bracha. Yisimcha lekim ke Ephraim uke Menashe, says the Bnei Yisafcha. May all of Klal Yisrael be zoicha, to be like Ephraim and Menashe. If only Klal Yisrael would respond the same way to similar situations where one person feels that the younger, that the less worthy is getting more than him, then this is going to be the greatest source of bracha. Then the Beis Hamikdash would be standing. Then all of the klalos in the world would have been long evaporated. In the Yisrael L'Torah we find a different suggestion as to why Ephraim and Menashe should have been chosen as the example of parental brachos rather than Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Ephraim and Menashe were the first Yidden born and educated in Golus. They were the first Yidden who were born and received the chinuch in Mitzrayim, yet turned out to be an equal to the Shvatim that were raised in the environment of Yaakov Avinu. Yosef HaTzadik, for Ephraim and Menashe, created an environment of Yaakov Avinu, created an island within the tomb of Mitzrayim. And therefore, they become the symbol of bracha. A bracha that is limited only to when things are working out your way, obviously has its shortcomings. The true bracha is a bracha that shines forth regardless of how dark the scenery is behind you. And that's what Ephraim and Menashe represented. And that explains the Samsayfer is really the essence of the rest of Yaakov Avinu's bracha as well. The Yidgul arrives b'kerev ha'aretz. That's somewhat of a sira. The Yidgul is the bracha of fish. Now we understand why fish is a symbol of bracha, given the ability of fish to multiply. But the Yidgul arrives b'kerev ha'aretz. Fish multiply in the water, not on land. Schacter Samsayfer, this is precisely the point. We all know the famous mashal of Yekida said, when the Romans were leading him off and they asked him, what did you do? Why did you continue teaching Torah? You knew the threat that would hover over you if you continued to teach Torah. B'Rabbim, and Rabbi Akiva told them the mashal was the fox who saw the fish very nervous swimming around, and he said to them, what's the problem? And they said, there are fishermen all over the place with huge big nets. So the fox said to them, why don't you come up over here on land? There are no fishermen's nets on the land, it's only in the water. And the fish said, you're supposed to be the most clever of animals. You're the most foolish. Madach over here in the place of our life, in the water. We're struggling to survive. You want us to go out onto land, where we have no basis of survival? Well, Yaakov Avinu's bracha was to create a basis of survival, even on land. In other words, his bracha was the yidgul arois, even the keref ha'aretz. Of course, when you're in the right environment, every yid will shine forth. But there's a long and difficult gullus coming. And in the course of that long and difficult gullus, many a fish is going to find itself on dry land. Yaakov Avinu's bracha was to excel even under those circumstances, to be able to do the impossible, to turn out children who are b'nei Torah, even b'kerev ha'aretz, even in the most alien of environments, to create the kind of island that Yosef HaTzadik was able to do for Ephraim and Menashe in Mitzrayim. Thus, the bracha, the yidgul arois, you should be like fish, you should multiply like fish. Where? B'kerev ha'aretz, even if you're not on home turf. And that's really the whole yesod of our parsha. The Chedush Yerim says, Vayechi Yaakov the Eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov, whose pechina is emes, paved the way for Klal Yisrael to exist, to live, to be sustained, and to grow in their ruchnius, even in Eretz Mitzrayim. Others question, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh discusses it, why it says Vayechi Yaakov be Eretz Mitzrayim as opposed to Vayechi Yisrael be Eretz Mitzrayim. The Ber Moshe from the Yerusha Rebbe explains that this is the point. Yaakov Avinu paved the way for even Klal Yisrael when Klal Yisrael is on a low madrega. They can still turn around and grab hold of their ruchnius. They can still be zeicha to madregas of Amunah and B'tachon of faith and chizik from Shemayim, although we would think that we have fallen below that point. There's no such thing. The Yaakov Borachias, for every member of Klal Yisrael, regardless of how low he has fallen, the Eretz Mitzrayim, regardless of how far out he happens to be. How can a yid be zeicha to this? So let's get back to our original question. What exactly was the misunderstanding over here in terms of who was on the right side, either Menashe or Ephraim? Yosef positioned them one way, and Yaakov tried to manipulate it a different way. The Chedush Yerim explains, Yosef went through some harrowing experiences, but he kept the Amunah, he kept his chizuk, he kept his betachon, he survived. And then he had his two sons. He named the first one Menashe. Why Menashe? Zakta pasuk, Hinashani Elokim, Eskol Amoli, Veskol Beis Avi. Hashem has made me forget all my misfortune and the terrible pangs of being yanked away from my father's house. I have attained a degree of stability, of being able to be satisfied with my current circumstances. Incidentally, of Shamshon Fal Hirsch, of a beautiful touch on the word Menashe, he says, a noisha is a creditor. You're not allowed to pressure someone to pay you back when you know he doesn't have. We feel like noisha. Hinashani Elokim. Yosef HaTzadik said, looking back at what happened, Hashem has made my misfortunes and my family into creditors. In other words, what had seemed until now to be the epitome of misfortune, to be the horror of horrors, in retrospect, this was my creditor. In other words, because of all these events, I have now attained the greatest joy. I have now attained a position to allow for the world to survive. Let's get back to the Pashat. Kinashani Elokim, Hashem made me forget, and his second son he names Ephraim. Hashem Hasheni Kar Ephraim Ki Efrani Elokim B'Yeretzani. For the Rebbeinu Shalom made me blossom in the land of my affliction. Dr. Chedush Yerim Yosef HaTzadik was always of the opinion, in terms of how a bracha takes effect, you first have to get to the point where you can forget your tzaros, and then you can be zeicha to bracha, you can be zeicha to happiness. Yaakov Avinu, however, didn't want it necessarily to have to work that way. Yaakov Avinu said the Ephraim can come first. Instead of harping on forgetting your tzaros, the Rebbeinu Shalom first sends bracha and sends so much good that the tzaros become immaterial. Shitas Yosef HaTzadik was, how is it possible to enjoy your simcha if you're still in pain? So therefore don't concentrate on the simcha as long as you're in pain. Concentrate first on alleviating and trying to put the pain behind you. Yaakov instructed, no, that the bracha comes to Ephraim first. Or rather the bracha can come to Ephraim first. Even though you're still in pain, even though things are still bothering you, concentrate on the good that is happening simultaneously. And as a result, you can feel the bracha and the blossoming and the pruruvu and the kedusha of Ephraim even before the official nishani, even before you officially can say my tzaras no longer trouble me. The Sosenis also quotes the Chedushim on this, but explains it a little bit differently. I don't know if it's the same vart or it was a different vart. Either way, the lesson is still equally as powerful. Yosef Tzaddik assumed that the Mahalach has to be Sur Meira v'Yasei Tov, which of course is the ideal way to do it. First to do tshuva, to remove your averos, and then to engage in time. Because the mitzvah that is done with a clean neshama can't be compared to a mitzvah that is done with a neshama that is bogged down by its chatayim. However, Yaakov Avinu said if you wait for doing it the right way, you may never get around to do it. Yaakov's bracha to Klal Yisrael was that Klal Yisrael should be zeicha to a psichas halev l'tayva, to a cheshik, to an enthusiasm, to want to learn, to want to daven, to want to do mitzvahs, even though they still have their baggage of averos. Menashe is to forget. The removal of things that are difficult. Ephraim is the bracha of Toiv. Yosef wanted the Menashe before Ephraim. Yaakov Avinu said that would be the right way to do it, but not the practical way to do it. I want to pave the way for Klal Yisrael to be zeicha to do good even before they're zeicha to remove the ra. There's the old cliche of the Dorfsman, the simple peasant, who found himself far from his town, and the sun was setting Friday. He drove his horses to the maximum, didn't stop to rest for a second, desperate to get home before Shabbos. He comes riding into town. He realizes everyone's already in the Beit Medrash davening. He was too late. He came in when it was already Shabbos. He walks into the shul. He sees how late it is. He's frustrated. He turns around. He walks out. Later on, the people on their way home see him sitting on his front porch and he's smoking. And they say to him, "What's the matter with you? How can you smoke on Shabbos?" And he answers, "Look, this Shabbos I blew already. I'll try again next Shabbos." That's a dangerous mistake that we all make in many different ways. Someone told me of a person who was given a diet and he was told that he can eat 2 tomatoes, and by mistake he ate 3. So as a result he said, "Nope, today I didn't adhere to the rules of my diet anyhow," so he sat down to his pizza pie. We do this all the time in different ways. We started davening, or at least everyone else started davening, and we were just going through the motions, and we realized we were already in the middle of Sikhat Zimra or in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei, and we really haven't truly davened or concentrated or actually pronounced one word correctly, and we sort of say, "Okay, I'll try again by Mincha." But don't try again by Mincha. Start from where you're up to now. Like the famous Mashal of Chavetz Chaim. Someone's holding a basket of fruit. Another person comes and knocks it out of his hands. Everyone is coming and grabbing his fruit. So the shaita stands and cries until all the fruit is gone. The Chacham, at least, throws himself on the floor and grabs also. Yosef demanded a certain degree of perfection. He demanded the Menashe before the Ephraim. Sur Meira, clean yourself, and then your mitzvahs will have so much more meaning. It will be on such a high madrega. Yaakov said, "No. Whatever you can do, do. First Ephraim, then Menashe. When you're involved enough in the Kiyum HaMitzvahs and you're on safe ground, then you can turn around and start working on doing tshuva for the past." The Rizal tells us the month of Tevis and half of Shvat, the darkest nights of the year, they belong to Esav. The Bnei Yisachar says that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu arranged for Hanukkah at least to shine the light into the tunnel of the Leilei Tevis U'Aruchim, of the long dark nights of Tevis, of the winter and the darkness, the hastara, the insecurity that it represents. And the 6 weeks from Pashas Shemot through Pashas Mishpatim, which are Rosh Tevis Shoidavim, represent special times for Yidden to do tshuva, in particular in regard to Inyanim of Kiddusha and so on. Shoidavim, the weeks of Shoidavim from Shemot through Mishpatim, represent reliving what Klal Yisrael went through in Mitzrayim. Klal Yisrael experienced a dark episode in Mitzrayim, but they didn't allow this dark environment to stop the light that shone forth from within them. They girded their ruchniistic swords and they maintained, through unbelievable challenges, their levels of Kiddusha and Tahara. They're getting together Friday nights and singing Shabbos Miras. And just like Hanukkah sort of shines the light into Tevis, so we have Parshas Vayechi. Vayechi Yaakov the Eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov gives a chiyus into the Yidden that he is leaving alone in Mitzrayim. As we conclude Sefer Bereshis and the story of the Avos, and we understand Maisa Avos similar bond, whatever the Avos davened for, whatever the Avos said, and whatever they did for us, being mispal for us. So we have to view our entering into Parsha Shemais as the koyach of the Avos who are staying with us and saying, we did whatever we can to pave the way to a vayechi Yaakov the Eretz Mitzrayim. You have your challenges, you have your nisyanis, you have your difficulties, but don't say you can't. For the Avos, and in particular Yaakov, have already established a road, established a tunnel for us to pass through. Vayevarchem, vayoimahu leimar, taich the kabriner. Vayevarchem, he benched him, vayoimahu on that day, leimar, to say as follows, but before you get to the actual bracha, look at the bracha in this Hagdama. Vayevarchem, vayoimahu, he benched him on that day. In other words, Yaakov gave Klal Yisrael a bracha, just see that day. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about yesterday. Do what you have to do today, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of the rest. If you look in a Sefer Torah, what is unique about the beginning of Parshas Vayechi and the end of Parshas Vayigash? There's no space. The common space that you find between the end of one Parsha and the beginning of the next Parsha is non-existent between Parshas Vayigash and Parshas Vayechi. And indeed, Rashi, quoting Chazal, asks Lama Parsha Zustuma. Why is there no space between the end of Vayigash and the beginning of Vayechi? And the answer is, since Yaakov Avinu was nifter, nistemu einayim belibam shel Yisrael mitzaras hashibut shevchilu l'shabda. The eyes and the hearts of Klal Yisrael were sort of closed, stuffed up. You didn't have the hashpah running through freely. There was a sense of pressure, a sense of tightness because of the tzaras hashibut that began simultaneously with the passing of Yaakov Avinu. Frek to say for Nesivos Shalom. Why do we have to get into this nistemu einayim v'libam shel Yisrael? The Medrash is just making the point that Gola started after Yaakov Avinu was nifter. Until then they were guests in Mitzrayim, and then they realized that they were at least on the way to becoming slaves in Mitzrayim. Until then they were honorable, distinguished ambassadors of a different country, and when Yaakov Avinu was nifter, suddenly they became a people that were difficult to tolerate. So that's all the Medrash should say. Kila shenifter Yaakov, the tzaras began, an historical fact. Why the stress on nistemu einayim belibam shel Yisrael? The eyes and the hearts of Klal Yisrael were closed as a result of the tzaras hashibut. And what does this mean, that the eyes and the hearts of Klal Yisrael were closed? So the Nesivos Shalom says we have to learn how to teach the words of the Medrash and understand the underlying message. The Medrash is not giving us a historical fact over here. The Medrash is not trying to chronologically give us dates and events. Yaakov Avinu was nifter, Golus began. The Medrash is saying that once Yaakov Avinu was nifter, the eyes and the hearts of Klal Yisrael were closed as a result of the tzarais. The tzarais in Mitzrayim, the fact that they were in Golus, the dangers of Golus, the difficulties of Golus, that may have began even when Yaakov Avinu was still alive. But the closing of their eyes and hearts as a result of the tzarais, that happened only with the passing of Yaakov Avinu. Kol zman that Yaakov Avinu was alive, there may have been tzarais, but it didn't close their eyes, didn't close their hearts. When Yaakov Avinu was nifter, suddenly they felt they were in Galus. Suddenly they couldn't see things right, and suddenly they couldn't feel things right. When Yaakov Avinu was alive, Yaakov taught them how to deal with Galus. Yaakov taught them how to keep your eyes and hearts open even in Galus. And that's what they lost now. Yaakov Avinu personifies the union of Yaakov Tikkun Tzilas Arvis. Avraham Avinu taught the Midah of Chesed, Yitzchak the Midah Hagvura. Yaakov taught Yidden Tiferes, to maintain a sense of beauty, to maintain a sense of the opposite of nistemu einayim, open hearts and open eyes to Kedusha and to Simcha. Even during a time of darkness, he taught Yidden how to daven Ma'ariv. That was Yaakov. Tzilas Arvis Rishus. Tzilas Arvis is technically voluntary, although today it is considered a chayv. The Nesivos Shalom explains there's another vart over here. Yaakov Avinu taught Yidden how to go about every aspect of life even the inyanim of rishus, not necessarily the mitzvahs per se, and to raise them to the level of mitzvahs. And that's more so than any other person in the Torah. Do the Psukim stress Yaakov Avinu is getting married, Yaakov Avinu is having children, child by child, the color of Yaakov Avinu's sheep, his negotiating with Lavan, speckled sheep, striped sheep, whatever this means, we don't know 100%. But what we do see is, in the story of Yaakov Avinu, we take every aspect of his life, every birth of a child, his will to get married, his negotiating with a swindler, his raising shiftei kosh shvatim in this kind of environment. Everything is spelled out. Why? Because Yaakov Avinu's mehus, his essence is raising everyday life to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yaakov Avinu taught you not just how to sit by a Gemara and learn, he taught you how to ride a subway if you have to, and still think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why when Yosef was faced with the ultimate point of his Nisayon, and he was beginning to cave in. And how does the Yitzhari get us to cave into Nisyonis? Because he tries to convince us that it's not so bad. Look, she saw the stars that you're supposed to have Shvatim together, all sorts of Heterim. It's L'Shem Shemayim. It'll be a Chil Hashem. If he doesn't do it, who knows what she'll say? There were arguments of Heter. And what stopped Yosef HaTzadik at the end? Ra de Musti Yoikne Shel Aviv. He saw the image of his father and he ran. Because the image of his father represents the idea that even in a life of heter, we only do things that, in the final analysis, does your heart tell you that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants this or that he doesn't want it, even though you can rationalize it. At the turn of the century, Yidden in America had unbelievable nisyonis, especially when it came to Shmir Shabbos. And unfortunately, the majority could not endure. But we don't understand what those nisyonis are, so it's not for us to speak. But you had Bati Midrashim and Bati Midrashim in the east side where people came and they put on their talents with the nicest atar and they sang the nicest kelada and sat down to Kiddush and they got onto the trolley cars and went to work. There was no public assistance. If you didn't go to work, then you didn't have food to eat. Not having the right job didn't mean that you couldn't trade in your car every 3 years. Not having the right job meant an empty icebox, an empty refrigerator if you had a refrigerator. There were many who did survive. And for the most part, they did it from week to week. He didn't come in on Shabbos, showed up Monday morning, the boss said, "Where were you?" Wasn't feeling well. The next week, Monday morning, "Where were you?" Had a headache. The next week, Monday morning, "Where were you?" Had a stomach ache. How interesting. Only on Shabbos? Who do you think I am? A person that can just give a worker off? Imagine you want to take a job but you can't come in any Tuesday or any Wednesday. I can't run a business like this, and unfortunately many of those bosses were Yidden themselves. And that was the end of your job. You held on to a job for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the most if you were a Shomer Shabbos. Well, Rav Nissen Pilchik, Zechron Levracha, was one of the Yidden who not only never Chas v'Shalom violated Shabbos, but he had a different attitude on Monday morning. He would take a job and he would come back Monday morning, and the boss would say to him and several other people, "Where were you on Saturday?" And one of them would say, "I wasn't feeling well." And the other one would say, "I tried to come and I got locked in my house." And when it came to Rav Nissen would say, "You want to know where I was? I davened in the morning, ich habe gegessen Schalt, I ate Schalt, and I danced with my kids and learned with them. I went to daven mincha and I ate Shalashudas. That's where I was." And the boss would say to him, "Oh yes, you can dance all week because you're fired." And Rav Nissen would answer, "I am going to dance all week. You know why? Because in my heart I know Shabbos is coming soon, so I have a reason to dance." Zok the Nesiv Shalom, take note. The Medrash is not saying that when Yaakov Avinu was nifter, suddenly the Mitzrayim began to do studies on anti-Semitism and said, maybe we should start this policy. The Tzara started before Yaakov was nifter, gradually. But it didn't close the eyes and hearts of Klal Yisrael. It was Kiva Shenifter Yaakov, and they lost this ability to deal with the frustrations and complications of life. suddenly nistimu einayim b'libam shel Yisrael mitzaras hashibud. Whether the tzaras hashibud started then, before, after is irrelevant. That's not the issue. That's not the message. The message is the hearts and eyes of Klal Yisrael. Because if the hearts and eyes of Klal Yisrael are open, then a Yid can endure anything. And if he's closed, then suddenly you become vulnerable to the tzaras hashibud. That's why it's after the union of Shalosh Shudas that is merumis to Yaakov Avinu. V'acholticha nachlas Yaakov Avicha nachla b'loy mitzari. Shalosh Shudas is the Suda of Shabbos that extends itself into the weekday. You can be marach with Shalosh Shudas as long as you wash before the Zman. The koyach of Yaakov Avinu is to extend the Shabbos into the weekday. One who eats Shalosh Shudas properly is zaycha to the concept of b'li mitzarim nachla, an inheritance without any boundaries. That is the koyach of Yaakov Avinu. An ability to keep eyes and ears open and maintain simcha in all difficult matzavim, even in the tzaras hashibud. Rav Aaron Kotler Zechayim Levracha, in his last days, was in the hospital. He was on a respirator, hooked up Rahman Islam to pipes, feeding tubes. His mouth was extremely dry. He asked for water. The doctor said that they could not give him water for medical reasons. And finally, when they saw how he was suffering, this was Wednesday afternoon, the doctor said, okay, you can take a sucking candy into your mouth to relieve at least some of the stress, some of the dryness, some of the thirst. And someone gave him the candy and he was about to make a bracha and put it in his mouth and said, no, I'm going to leave it for Shabbos. If all I have is this sucking candy, I want it to be my mitzvah of Oynik Shabbos. This was on Wednesday. The pasuk says, "B'chol tzarasim lo tzar." The Talmud Yaakov Yosef explains, there's a koyach hapel benifel over here. He actually brings it b'shem Rambam. When a Yid somehow manages to find the Rebbeinu Shalom, even in difficult situations, that within itself is the greatest hamtakas hadinim, sweetening of the judgment. Within every bit of sorrow there is chesed. And the hisgalus of that chesed is when a Yid applies his complete heart, that's b'chol tzarasim lo yisar, that nothing is hefker and everything is by design, and whatever Kadosh Baruch Hu does is good. And that has the koyach to be mehapachet l'tayv. The person should always say whatever Kadosh Baruch Hu does is good. Then we have the story of Rabbi Akiva, who had his chicken, his donkey, and his candle, and they didn't want to let him into the town. He had to sleep outside of the town, and the wind blew out the candle, and a cat ate up his chicken, and a lion ate up his donkey. And he said, and that night an army came and destroyed the entire town. Had he been in the town, had they let him in, had his candle given him away, the donkey brayed or the chicken made noise, the rooster would have made noise, and the armies would have found him. And suddenly he saw that every aspect of his tsar, every ounce of the tzaros and agmas nefesh that he had was all the time. And you have the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu. Now it's important to understand, explains the Nesiv Shalom, what happened over here. Initially when the tzaros began, well before he realized what the end of the story would be, that this would all save his life, step by step, with each agmas nefesh, they don't let me into the town. The response to that is, no. If Kadosh Baruch Hu has it this way, then it's good. And he swallows that agmas nefesh. And then the next agmas nefesh, same response. The next agmas nefesh, the same response. And all the way at the end, he sees how at every step of the way, this is what saved him. But he was zeicher to see this because he responded this way. Because he kept on insisting every step of the way, and as difficult as it gets, and when I turned the page, there's another problem. And he still kept on saying, this is all the Rebbeinu Shalom, and it's all good, whether I understand it or not. As a result, he was zeicher to see the chesed. Had he not responded this way, at each page, at each chapter of Agmas Nefesh, in the course of events, then he would not been zeicher to see it. The concept of Gamzu L'Toiva and the union of Kol Ma D'Avid Ochman L'Tav Avid is not just an explanation. It's an avoida. And the more the Yid works on himself, as every agmas nefesh unfolds, then the more he will be zeicher to see the chesed in it. Had Rabbi Akiva not responded to his initial disappointment of being locked out of the town, he may have never seen the story in this light. It may have never unfolded in this manner. And that's where the pasuk begins, Vayechi Yaakov Yeretz Mitzrayim 17 shana. This is a parasha that begins by telling us how Yaakov Avinu was nifter, what happens afterwards, and it begins, ironically, Vayechi Yaakov. Now it's important to understand this. Yaakov Avinu, relative to the Madrega of Yaakov Avinu, which we have no hasaga, what that is. But he also had his ups and downs. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh at the beginning of Parshas Viyachi elaborates to explain why sometimes Yaakov Avinu is referred to as Yisrael, from the point that the pasuk says that your name should no longer be Yaakov, and still the pasuk sometimes refers to him as Yaakov. And he shows that whenever there was somewhat of pain and frustration, difficulty or tsar in Yaakov Avinu's life, he's referred to as Yaakov. This is important to understand. We're not saying that when Yaakov Avinu encountered the tragedies of his life, that had no bearing on him. A person who doesn't feel sad when sad things happen is not normal. That's not the issue. The issue is, okay, now that the sadness is here, now that the depression is here from time to time, how am I going to react to it? Am I going to allow it to crush me, or am I going to keep on repeating Kol Ma'od Achmar L'Tav until I work myself out of it? That was the koyach of Yaakov Avinu. Yes, Yaakov Avinu was a human being. Yaakov Avinu felt the pain and the hurt and the grieving in his life. But he worked himself out of it, and he taught Klal Yisrael how to work himself out of it. It doesn't say Vayechi Yisrael b'Eretz Mitzrayim, that everything was just hunky-dory and fine and great. It was Vayechi Yaakov. There were difficulties in Mitzrayim. He knew he was in Mitzrayim. He knew that sorrows of Golus were coming. But he taught them how to live in these sorrows. Vayechi Yaakov b'Eretz Mitzrayim Shavayis Rishona Shavayis is Gematria Toiv. He taught them how to see the Toiv, the Yar L'Kim Esawarki Toiv, the Or Hagonis, the hidden chesed and light in difficulty. He worked himself out of the situation of Yaakov, and as a result, Vayikvu Yemei Yisrael Lamos. Right before his Petira, he was Zaycha to the greatest chesed in his life. Aside from the fact that an Inyan that a tzaddik before his Petira is Zaycha to special madregas, that's why it changes back to Yisrael, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explains. But there's a more practical aspect to this, the Mefarshim explains. Vayechi Yaakov, he lived with the difficulties of Mitzrayim, taught Klal Yisrael how to keep their eyes and ears open to retain the darga of Taiv. And as a result, in Mitzrayim, eventually he mastered Vayishtachavu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita. It didn't come easy. It came after many repetitions of Kol Ma'od Achmar L'Tav, working on it in terms of himself and teaching it to his children. It was an avodah for Yaakov Avinu. You have to work your way from Yaakov to Yisrael. But as long as Yaakov was there for them to teach them how to do it, their eyes and hearts would remain open. There are two parshiyos that begin by telling us about the passing of a tzaddik, and both of them ironically begin with the word Vayechi. Parshas Chayei begins by telling us that Sarah Imeinu passed away, and it begins Vayiu Chayei Sarah, and the life of Sarah was. And Parshas Vayechi, which tells us about the Petira of Yaakov Avinu, begins also Vayechi Yaakov, that Yaakov lived. The Yevman L'Torah brings, that's the pasuk's message over here. Tzaddikim live their life with an understanding that down here it's very temporary, it's transient, it's, as the Masul Fisharim says, merely a proizdor, a hallway to Olam Haba. And therefore they deal with the frustrations of life differently. No one is immune to frustration, but they deal with it differently when it comes. And as a result, when the pasuk is describing the Petira of a tzaddik, the pasuk describes it as Vayechi. Now they are ready to benefit from the fruits of their labor. Now they are zaycha to live the life that they had been living for. Suppose a person wakes up in the morning and he's rolling through his davening, rolling through his breakfast, rolling through his benching. He's on his way to work, and he just stops a second and says, what is happening to me? Where's my life going? Day in, day out, no meaning, no learning, no chesed, no tzedakah. What's the point of this? And he says to himself, Adka, from here on I'm going to change. From here on my davening is going to be a davening, my learning is going to be a learning. I'm going to look to go to shiurim. I can't. I don't want to waste away my life. And in his heart, he makes that Kabbalah that from here on I'm going to praise Hashem. Let bygones be bygones. Whatever I have to deal with in the past, I'll deal with in the form of tshuva, but I want to be a new person. I don't want my life just to roll by the way it's going now. So we know that Machshava Tova HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzaref l'maaseh. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers this person's actions as if they were done already. The Rebbeinu Yoina says that's shot in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Misha Maisav Merubim Chachmasai Chachmasai Miskayem. So someone's actions are more than his wisdom is sustained. Someone's actions are more than his wisdom. How can his actions be more than his wisdom, Frek the Rebbeinu Yoina? If he doesn't have the knowledge, then on what basis does he perform his actions? And the Teretz refers to a Kabbalah. But the Rebbeinu Yoina says when that Yid is makabel upon himself that I am going to learn, I am going to do, and that's it, I want some meaning to my life. Right there and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers all of these actions done. And as a result, he is a person that is Maisav Merubim Mechachmasei. Eventually his Chachma will catch up, but he's on the right track. If a person feels, but I have tried this so many times, it simply does not go, there are so many yakuzim, so many things get in the way. Whenever I try to sit down and learn, 1,000 different things happen. Phones ring from all sides, doorbells ring from all sides, telegrams come, email comes, and it seems that the whole world is out there determined to stop me from trying to get my act together. So Adarabba, that's a sin that your Kabbalah is meaningful. If the Koiches HaMekatrigim are trying to stop it. And the more difficult the situation is physically for you to carry out your plan of doing tshuva, then the more meaningful your Kabbalah is. So there's a murder Gevart in this week's Seder from Yain Sinevishitz in the Sefer Tiferes Yanis. The pasuk says, "Vayishtachavu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita." What does this mean? That Yaakov Avinu bowed down toward the top of the bed. So Rashi tells us, "Hafach atzmai letzad hashchina." He turned toward the Shechina. Mikan amru shehashchina l'mayla me'rishayso shel chayla. That the Shechina is above the head of a chayla, the head of a sick person. Zakt Rabbi Yonis Neimshitz. A person who sinned, Rahman al-Islam, Kozman, he is healthy, and he can physically do tshuva, and conduct ma'asim tovim, and be mesak in his chatoim. So he was pagan b'maisa, he did things wrong, he has to get out there and do tshuva samishko. He has to do tshuva b'maisa. Thoughts are not enough. It's a good start, but it's not enough just to have Kabbalah. Get out there and let's see the way you're going to shiurim. Get out there and let's see the way you start davening. Get out there and let's see the way you start performing acts of kindness and chesed. However, when a person, Rahman al-Islam, is a chayla, so the this person is not well, and he's on his bed now, and he's thinking about his life, and in his heart he wants to do tshuva. In his mind he wants to become closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Chazal tell us that the Shechina is l'mayla me'rishayso shel chayla. What does that mean? It means that as soon as this person is in machshava, even if the gesture goes only as far as the feeling in his heart, because that's all he can do in bed, but the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I know that's all you can do, and as a result, your tshuva has already been accepted. That is a chesed of Hashem, to be mekabel the tshuva of someone who is only doing tshuva b'machshava, because at this point, until he gets his refuah, he does not have the koyach to do tshuva through avodah ma'asiyos. And you have to understand, says the Yain Sinevishitz, this is the kind of tshuva that even malachim and tzrafim don't see. They don't recognize the machshava of a person. This particular kind of tshuva that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepts, if that's all he can do right now, this tshuva goes directly to the Rebbeinu Shalom. It is only lifnei hashchina. And that is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu sets aside all of the malachim and tzrafim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will accept this. I am the only one who can understand this. That is pshat. Shehashchina l'mayla me'rishayso shel chayla. The Shekhinah is there to accept a tshuva and consider this person a tzaddik even though he didn't lift a finger yet. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu says in his state all he can do is hope and want to be better, and therefore that want is considered accepted. He is already a person that is Maisav Mirubin Mechachmasai. So Memela we see from here Mayrdeki Yisai. When someone is makabel upon himself to do tshuva or to try to get his act together, so to speak, and it does not work, he tries the utmost. And it just seems that the Satan, the Sahara, is putting huge boulders in his path. So Adarab, if this is true, that you're giving it your best shot, if you are really, really trying, and you are really, really makabel upon yourself, the fact that there are neniyas, there are things blocking you from doing it, means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu then puts more emphasis on your machshava, on your will. So that's a ma'ila, it's not a chasaron. A person makes up, from now on I'm going to daven Shemona Esrei real slowly, with a lot of kavanah, word for word. And as soon as he starts davening, the whole world, the whole globe, all the network news channels start flashing in front of his mind. Every daiga that he has, every worry that he has, every business decision. Indeed, the Kafka Rebbe said, you're not so much liach in business because they have such a long Shemona Esrei to think about it. And you struggle with every single word of the Shemona Esrei. I made up, I'm going to daven slowly. I made up, I'm going to try to be machavin, especially by the Shemas. And every once in a while you realize your mind is wandering off again. So one person may say, look, I tried, it doesn't go, let me forget it. But the real way is, Adarabah. The more I try, and the more my mind wanders off, the more I'm showing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look, my Kabbalah is the real Kabbalah, what should I do? This is my nature. Help me. For every battle back into the Shemona Esrei, your Kabbalah is more meaningful. Because you're showing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though it's so difficult for you, and even though by nature I am so distracted, I am still going to try again and again. Instead of saying, I just can't do it, you should say, and that's really what Rabbi Yonasan Eibishter is telling us, the more I can't do it is the more the reason I should try, because my trying is more meaningful and more accepted. Of course, just like we find by Avram Avinu, when he was going to the Akedah, the Malach put all sorts of stumbling blocks in his path. And Avram kept on pushing on, but at one point the Kadosh Baruch Hu said to the Malach, Adkan, don't stop him anymore. The Yitzhar only has a shus to go so far. But he has a shus to go pretty far. And therefore we have to view those boulders as a maila, not as a chasar. Assuming that you're not giving up, assuming you don't become complacent, assuming that you are continuing to persevere and try regardless of the difficulties, that should be a chizuk, not a discouragement. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, he can't do anymore. If he can't do anymore, and he's still trying, and doesn't give up, so therefore his ratzon, his Kabbalah becomes a Maisa. That, says again, it's an Eibishter, is the meaning of the Shechina being l'mayla mereshayis of Shalchayla. For a person who cannot do more, then the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I will establish my presence there so that something can happen which no other Malach can affect, and that is his machshava. His will is considered as if it is done. He is a tzaddik. Pasuk says, "Vayter vayagid leYaakov vayomer inei bincha Yosef vayelecha." And at this point, vayischazik Yisrael vayeshev alamit, and he sits up on the bed. The Gemara says in Masechtas Nedarim that when one person comes to be mevaker chayla another person, he takes 1/60th of his sickness. So presumably we understand that the 1/60th goes into the visitor, but it becomes batal b'shisha, therefore it has no adverse effect on the mevaker, but he has succeeded in at least lightening the pain of the chayla by 1/60th. However, there's a catch. If there has to be some type of common denominator between the chayla and the mevaker, they have to be similar. It has to be bar marzolai in order for this to work. And that is why Yaakov wanted Dafka Yosef to come, because Yaakov and Yosef, as we know, were very similar to each other. They even looked alike. Rashi gives us a whole list of things of how Yosef's life patterned after Yaakov. So Vayagid LeYaakov Vayomer Hinei Bincha Yosef Ba'ilach. Says the Vilna Gaon, Hinei is Gematria Shishim. Hey is 5, Nun is 50, and the other Hey is 5. Hinei Bincha Yosef Ba'ilach. The potential of you losing 1/60th of your sickness is now coming. Vayischazik Yisrael, and right away, as Yosef HaTzadik walks in, Yaakov Avinu feels lighter, he feels better, and vayechi valamita. He sits up on the bed. Dr. Zilmagon Amar de Gavar, Hamita of Gematria, 59. Because he now only had 59 halakim to his sickness, as opposed to the 60 that he had before. Yosef Tzadi came to be Mevakar Chayleim. But what we have to learn from here is that the milos of Kabbalah, meaning what we said before, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepts our ratzain and will, in the event that that's all we can do, that is true, in as much as we prove that as soon as a little window opens up and we can do, that we do. When Yaakov Avinu couldn't, he accepted the fact that he couldn't. He was not chas v'shalom depressed by this. He was not upset by this. He said, this is the massive. I can only do what I can do. And even if all I can do is the ratzain and the will, HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers that done. There's a direct connection between him and the Ashras HaShechina. But as soon as his sickness became lighter, even by a mashu, even by such a small fraction as 1/60th, Yaakov Avinu already takes advantage of that. He says, now I have to do. Now that I can do, I have to do. Even though his sickness is only reduced by a fraction, but Yaakov Avinu's response to that, so I can do a fraction more. And right away he was mekayim the mitzvah of giving kavod l'malchus. The Ber Moshe of the Yerush of Rebbe Zchaim Bracha brings a fascinating thought on the Messiah here in this pasuk. Where else do you have in Tanakh the lashon of al hamita? The pasuk says in Megillas Esther v'Haman noifel al hamita. So what is the connection between Vayichai Yisrael, Vayeshev al hamita, and Haman falling on the bed? The Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos as well as in Masechtas Gittin, Chazi de Kamefach, that one sage at the times of the Gemara saw another and he saw that he was frightened. So he told him that you're a sinner, because it says Pachdu b'tzion chatayim, only the sinners are frightened. So he asked him back, but the pasuk says, Ashrei Adam, how fortunate is the person mefachei tamid, who always lives with a pachad. And he answered, Hu b'divrei Torah. That refers to divrei Torah. Like the pasuk says, Makshali b'yibul bara, one who was always scared that the Yetzer Hara is going to entice him or trap him. But stam bin yoni ha'olam, he has no right to live with the pachad. The Ber Moshe explained, La'amita shel davar, the emes is, the tain over here wasn't so much that he was frightened. The tain was that he was frightened of the siba and not of the mesaveh. When a person anticipates difficulties and as a result he is concerned or even frightened, Rahman al-Islam, the pachad has to be from Hashem Yisbarach, because Hashem Yisbarach is the mesaveh kol ha-sibah. The Navi Yeshaya says, Asher shedet ati. Asher and his huge armies are only my stick. They're a tool of my wrath. Asher is only a siba to punish Klal Yisrael. And therefore the pasuk in Yeshaya says, you are constantly worried in the Hamas and Neitzik. You are so frightened. What is the taina? Well, of course they were frightened. The taina was, but what were they frightened of? They were frightened of the Hamas and Neitzik. They were frightened of the siba. These huge armies are coming to conquer us. What are we going to do? And they didn't stop to think that the siba comes from the Mesaveh Kol HaSibah. Their pachad should have been of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Like the mashal of the Rebbeinu Yoina, that when the dog is hit with a stick, it's angry at the stick. So Asher Yodam Mesachei Tamid means a person who understands that in his difficulties in life and various different fears, this is a sinner min Hashemayim, they want him to do tshuva. This pachad is coming from Hashem Yisbarach. The etzem thing that he is worried about is not the issue. That's just the stick. So one who understands that the pachad has to come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so he looks to where he can rectify his life. And the male of the pachad is diminished, the pachad is destroyed. However, actually, the one who is in action and says, I don't believe in Hashgacha Pratis, I am worried about the stick, Yipol Bara, because he doesn't do tshuva. He's not scared of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the pasuk says, Vayischazek Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu, of course, lived his entire life with a direct fear of Hashem Yisbarach. Yaakov's response to his personal nisyonos in life, to his difficulties in life, was always Vayischazek Yisrael, Vayeshev al hamita. He took the mita. He took the bed, he took his situation, and he said, how can I come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu has put me into this master. Now how can I deal with it? How can I become closer to him as a result? The immediate effect of this type of attitude, of this type of response to crisis is L'hama noisel alamid. His emunah within itself destroys the koyach hara. Now it says by Shimshon, Vatitzlach alav ruach Hashem, the ruach Hashem settled on him, and it gave him this tremendous power of success, this huge gevura, and he was able to rip up the lion the way you would rip up a goat. What does it mean, Vatitzlach alav ruach Hashem? The Ber Moshe says, a koyach of emunah and betachon. That's what it was. Suddenly in Shimshon's eyes, he looked at this lion and he said, this lion has no power on its own. It's only the reshus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes away the power of the lion, it's the same as a goat. There's no difference. And the male of the lion became a goat. When we read the Titzlach alav ruach Hashem, so we say, Shimshon was overwhelmed by this tremendous koyach of gevura and power. What it is, this gevura and power came from emunah and betachon. It's accessible to all of us. The more Shimshon believed that this lion is only a goat, unless the HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns it into a lion, then the more it was a goat. The great bracha that Shimshon had was the great koyach of emunah that was channeled into our heart. Because in the face of an Nisayan, we forget HaKadosh Baruch Hu when we fall into the trap of dealing with the Siba, not the Messiah. Shimshon's gevura was in his koyach of emunah. And that was the life of Yaakov Avinu. Vaychazek Yisrael. Whether it was facing the difficulties of Esav, facing the difficulties of Lavan, facing the myriad of tzores that Yaakov Avinu had, his response was always Vaychazek Yisrael. He strengthens himself to rise above the Siva and deal with the Messiah and say, it is between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore the ultimate result of Yaakov Avinu sitting up on the bed was the Haman Noifel al Hamita. The Messiah is making it clear to us that this same koyach of chizuk and emunah and betachon applies to Klal Yisrael throughout all of the generations. And if we want Haman to fall, then we have to concentrate on the chizuk of how Yaakov Avinu sat up. I once passed a gentleman on the street who was fishing in his pocket for a quarter for the meter, and it looked like he was in distress and in a rush, and he seemed to have everything but a quarter. So I put my hands into my pocket, and I happened to have a quarter, and I offered it to him. He graciously accepted it, and he said, it's a chesed shel emes. And he caught me off guard for a moment. Chesed shel emes, what did he mean? And then I realized what he meant. V'yasisa imadi chesed ve'emes alma sigbereini b'Mitzrayim. Rashi says that chesed shel oisin im hamesim hu chesed shel emes. The chesed that is done by taking care of the needs of a nes is considered chesed shel emes. It's a real, true chesed, as opposed to ordinary favors you do for people. What's in the back of your mind when you do those favors? I'll lend you my car today. Tomorrow you give me yours when mine doesn't work. But when a person is part of a Chevra Kedisha, and this neshama is now going to the world of peace and tranquility and olam haba, he can't, at least not be pashtus, he can't do you the favor back. We're soon going to see a little bit later that is not necessarily so. But in terms of the way we think he can't return the favor, at least he can't return it right away because he's going to the olam emes and you're still doing it for him. You cannot expect anything in return, and therefore that is the example of a chesed shel emes. Now, of course, what this gentleman meant to say was, I shouldn't expect to get the quarter back. What the chesed shel emes signifies, giving and don't expect it back in return. It's okay. I gave it to him with my whole heart. But I began to wonder, why is it that belonging to a Chevra Kedisha, or taking care of the last request of a nes, is indeed called chesed shel emes? So Rashi says why it's called chesed shel emes, because he won't pay you back. But every single day, we recite a Mishnah that clearly says, you do get paid back. Every single morning we say, Elu dvarim, she'adam oichel perseim ba'olam hazeh, v'keren kiyamis le'olam haba. the Elohim kibbutz of the aim ugmos chasadim mashkamas beis neder shachas arvis uzikr cholam achnosas kala ulevoyas hameis. So here you have a Mishnah that promises, that says there's no question about it. Being oisik behalvas hames is something that you will have the principle of this reward intact in Olam Haba, and you will eat from the payers down here in this world. You can't have any better reward than that. It's the best investment that one can possibly make. So what's shot? Rashi tells us chesed she'oitzim im hamesim is chesed shelemes, because you cannot hope for a reward. And here you have a Mishnah that says halvos hames is one of the things that you have a guaranteed reward for. Now, was that person right? Is this really called a chesed shelemes when you give someone something even trivial like a pen or a quarter and you're in a rush, just keep it? We mentioned several weeks ago that Yehuda HaChassid says that a person should always try to keep small change in his pocket. Why? And here's a fascinating reason why. Because often you walk on the street and you meet a person who's in a jam. He needs small change. He needs a quarter for the phone, he needs a quarter for the meter. Or it's a hot day and he needs $1 for a soda in a machine where it doesn't give change. He has $100 in his pocket, but he needs change. And you're there and you give him the change. And you have relieved him from his distress. And he says to you, may you be blessed. Thank you. That kind of bracha that comes from a person who was just relieved from pressure by you, that bracha is genuine. It's real. He says it from the depth of his heart. And in Mela, there's a much greater chance that bracha will be Makuyim. That indeed it'll take place. So prepare yourself. Put yourself in a situation where you have that small change for the person, and Mela will be the recipient of these brachas. And you never know, when a person's in trouble and you help him and he gives you a bracha, you never know what the bracha can do for you. So let's think, Taka. So this person that got the quarter for the meter, is it really a chesed shelemes? Maybe it's kind of selfish. He's taking the quarter and he says it's a chesed shelemes, and Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid says, I may be able to get a bracha here that I wouldn't be able to receive under any other set of circumstances. I remember once walking into an auto parts store to purchase booster cables, and someone said to me, you always speak about betachin. You don't have betachin? What do you need booster cables for? Who says you'll get stuck? So I started to say, well, you have to make a shtaglos, you have to be responsible. But then suddenly the man answered the question. He said, Mistam, you're buying it to help someone else who's stuck. And the truth is, all joking aside, it's a beautiful way to think of it. Going out to buy things, saying, I hope I don't get stuck, but I want to be there to help someone else who may be stranded on a highway. Now, again, same style. If I give my lawnmower to a neighbor, so tomorrow I'm going to ask for his axe. I'm going to ask for his tractor. But I stop on the street to give someone a boost that I never saw before, and by all probabilities I will never see again. So is this a chesed shelemes? Is this a higher level of chesed? Or is Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid saying, no, adarabah. Because that person is stranded, therefore I'm positioning myself to get brachas that ordinarily I would not be able to get. So let's try to put all of this in perspective. We could say simply that as long as what you're expecting is a ruchniistic kind of bracha, in other words, you're saying, the B'nai Shalom, let me generate chesed upon myself by doing chesed to others. That may be shaloi l'shma, but it's definitely the first step in a career of chesed that leads to l'shma. Chafetz Chaim explains, he brings from the Zohar, every single time a person engages in an act of chesed, you generate chesed on yourself, on your family, and on the entire world. So we do acts of chesed, and we bear in mind what the Chafetz Chaim teaches us at the beginning of the Sefer Shmir Saloshin, and then by Havas Chesed, that this generates chesed for the world, and we are definitely not being selfish. Adarabah, we're expressing our emunah in a B'nai Olam. And when a person does chesed in hamesim, and he says he's going to belong to a Chevra Kedisha, or he goes to show kavod for the mace, he does not expect any tashlum gemur from the mace in a gashmiistic sense, because the mace is on a different world now. So he's doing it only with emunah in Divrei Chazal. He's doing it with an emunah in nitzchias, in a Borei Olam, that this chesed is going to come back and support him and help him. That is still within the confines of chesed shel emes. Elamai, of course, like the Gemara says, as he engages in more and more chesed, he becomes closer and closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he thinks less about what he is going to get and more about doing the L'Shem Shemayim. You can go up and up in the Madrega, but even the very lowest Madrega, the first rung on the ladder, I am doing this chesed because it is going to generate a chesed to the world and chesed upon myself. Apparently, Rashi in this week's Sedra tells us is still within the theater of chesed shel emes. Rashi still calls it Eina Mitzapel Tashlum Gemul. Tashlum Gemul means, all right, I'm giving you my vacuum cleaner, but the next time I need your toaster, I don't want to see you kvetch about it. That's what Mitzapel Tashlum Gemul means. Within the Ruchniistic arena, or even as Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says, let me have that quarter to be able to help someone who's stuck, even though I'm doing it because I want to get that bracha of a distressed person who is just relieved. It may be the lowest rung on the ladder in the stairs to chesed, but it is valid. There's nothing negative about this. Adarabah. It is a training process to a much greater level and a great way to get good brachas. The Gemara says if someone gives a selul tzedakah al menashe yichya b'ni on the condition my son should live, harei that tzaddik gomer. Some say that was really Rashi Tevis. Tzaddik Gimel stands for tzedakah gemura. But regardless, you see that once I'm in the emunah level of it, I'm going to do chesed because I know HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to pay me back somehow. It may not be in the way that I'm expecting. I'm definitely across the line. This is within some level of chesed shel emes. It's represented by the Chevra Kedisha, by the chesed that is done with Mason, because here it's obvious he can't return the lawnmower. But that's not the only kind of chesed shel emes. Any chesed that you're doing without stipulating some type of gashmiistic reward automatically puts you into the chesed shel emes arena. Now, I'd like to share with you two perspectives on chesed shel emes in this week's parsha. One from one of the greatest Bali Musa, and the other from one of the most famous Chassidish Svarim. And that's going to also help us sort things out here a little bit. The first comes from Moshe Matre Epstein. He asks a stark question. Yaakov Avinu makes it sound to Yosef Tzaddik as if you owe me nothing. I'm asking you to do a chesed l'shem chesed shel emes. It's not that you owe me anything. It's not that I can give you anything for this. Just pure chesed shel emes alma sigmareni b'Mitzrayim. Yosef doesn't owe anything to Yaakov Avinu. He's your father. He raised you. How many sleepless nights did he have worrying about you? For 22 years he cried for you. You owe him nothing? It's just chesed shel emes? Don't you have a moral responsibility to take care of the needs of your father? If anything else, without even getting into the chiyuv of kibbut aviyim. Furthermore, in a sense, isn't this sort of insulting to Yosef Tzaddik? Yaakov Avinu makes it sound like the time has come for you to do me a favor. What has Yosef been doing for almost 2 decades? He supported Yaakov and his entire family. Why does Yaakov Avinu make it sound like, look, it's very nice, you brought me to Mitzrayim, you gave me a kingly welcome, you supported my whole family for almost 20 years, 17 years, but right now you provided food and shelter for 70 people to start with, and now who knows how many hundreds of people by now. And Yaakov Avinu says, okay, that's all fine and well, but right now I would like you to do me a real favor. Till now it wasn't a real favor. But Moshe Matre says, why do we call chesed she'osim im hamesim chesed shel emes? Because any other favor that you do for someone, if you try to do him a favor, of course you are rewarded for such, but you don't really know whether it's a favor or not, because you don't know if it's good for him or not. You give someone a loan of $100,000, that's a tremendous favor. But if he invests that and loses it or gets into trouble by investing in the wrong kinds of business, so ultimately it wasn't a favor. In terms of your schar, you'll be rewarded. You can only do what you can. But in reality, if you look at the substance of it, you cannot say it was a real favor. It would have been better for this person not to get the loan and therefore not lose it. Therefore, he says, the only real chesed shel emes is the chesed she'osim im hamesim. the proper kavod, the final honor, that is vadei chesed shel emes. Any other chesed that a person does, only the Rebbeinu Shem knows whether it was actually good for him. Well, only the Rebbeinu Shem knows right away, and for us, it's only time that sometimes will tell us. Now, this in no way should dilute a person's cheshek to want to do chesed. We have to try our hardest in terms of what we think a chesed is. And the Rebbeinu Shem will reward us as if it were a full chesed. That's our avodah. But in terms of substance, in terms of reality, we don't know what is really a chesed shel emes. Now let's see how the Tiferes Shloima looks at this. V'yasisa imadi chesed ve'emes. The Ramban really asks a kasha when Rashi says chesed shel emes is the chesed she'osim im hanesim. After all, Eliezer also used the lashon chesed ve'emes, and over there it wasn't chesed she'osim im hanesim. Zok the Tiferes Shloima. There are people who are zeicha to a lofty neshama at the time that they're born. Then you have others who aren't necessarily born with a high neshama, however, because they fulfilled a certain mitzvah with the right kavanah, they are zeicha to something called a koyach ha'ibur, which means that a neshama from a very high realm attaches itself to them and gives them the siyata d'shmaya, the courage, the cheshek, the power, the insight, the ability to do things that until they were zeicha to this, they could have never done it. Sometimes when you do the right mitzvah, there are certain neshamas and shemayim that attach themselves to you in a positive sense. And that's what it means, habal l'tayar l'sayin, I say. One who comes to purify himself, he is helped. Sometimes neshamas that have a shaychus to a person, through certain mitzvahs that a person did after they were zeicha to that relationship, these neshamas can come when you make a sincere effort and continue to help you in your avodas habayre. And that is the meaning of the chazal, hamaskul b'mitzvah, one who begins a mitzvah, oimim lo yvei, say to him, Gemara, go ahead and finish. Who is the they over here? Who is the they that cheer him on and say, come on, finish? These are the neshamas that a person sometimes acquires, a relationship with neshamas and shemayim that a person sometimes acquires as a result of a good deed. And he says, this is pshat, not the conventional pshat, but indeed a fascinating pshat in the Mishnah in the Masechtas Avos. Pashut pshat, that your house should be a dwelling place, a meeting place for the chachamim when they get together. But he says, al pidrush, that your house means your body. Like the Apostle in Mishlei says, v'chachma, yivne bayis, that is the nefesh. In other words, prepare yourself with mitzvahs in such a way that your nefesh, your neshama that is in your body, will be zeicha to many, many neshamas of chachamim who come around to help you. Like we find by the Rimagash, who was the Rebbe of the Rambam, and the Arizal said he had within him many neshamas of Tanoim. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos goes on to say, if you do certain mitzvahs with Mesiras Nefesh and you associate yourself automatically with neshamas and shemayim, although you may not know this, suddenly your neshama is filled with the koyches of tzaddikim of previous generations. So automatically, what follows? Tishaisa b'tzames b'reim. You will drink with thirst their words. You have a natural cheshek, an intrinsic inspiration to associate yourself with the words of the chacham, although you can't even explain why this is happening. And he also teaches the pasuk v'chol chacham leiv b'chem yavoyu v'yasu. That's by the Mishkan. That when a person does a mitzvah with Mesiras Nefesh, he acquires heavenly help from previous neshamas. And it becomes v'chol chacham leiv b'chem, that is within you, those neshamas, those kaichas within you. Yavoyu v'yasu, they all gather together and they help to push you through difficult times and fulfill tasks that under normal circumstances may have been above your head. And this, he says, is another pshat in Rashi. Rashi tells us, chesed she'osim im hamesim hu chesed shel emes. Chesed she'osim im hamesim, in other words, the mesim hakdoshim fulfill with the person a chesed shel emes. Why is it chesed shel emes? Zok Rashi she'ena metzapa l'tashlim gemul. These are neshamas that come down from Shemayim to help you get by difficult times, or to encourage you for mitzvahs. What favor can they get in return from you? They're in Olam Haba already. It can't get any better for them than they already have. Yet they volunteer to come down and help you because they admire your Mesiras Nefesh for mitzvahs. And that is the chesed shel emes that the pasuk is referring to. So, did you ever wonder how you were able to get through a difficult situation where you suddenly had the inspiration and the courage to do it? One never knows. Rav Shlomo Hyman, one of the first Rosh Hashivas in Tervadas. In all the shiurim, he was very, very involved with the Vichai Ege. The Vichai Ege to him was always something special. He pondered his words every day of his life. Before he was nifter, he was very sick. And our Eidim who wrote this down, who testified to this, right before he was nifter, he said, quickly, bring a chair for a Vichai Ege who has come to accompany me. One never knows with whom you may have a shaychus with by doing the right thing at the right moment.
This shiur is distributed by Kol Hadas, 11 Steichenes Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.